All right, welcome back to episode 2 of the Cuatro Sportz Podcast. I'm here with, once again, Joe and Eric. How you guys doing?
Good, how are you?
Pretty good. How you doing, Eric?
Doing well. Nice day out, nice and cool.
It is a beautiful day, depending where you are in the United States of America. Let's get going into the topics. We have a bunch of topics to talk about, ranging from the Edwin Diaz injury to the new changes coming up to the MLB season. And of course, the one debate, is the World Baseball Classic a joke? So let's get right into it. We're going to start with the top topic of the week. Obviously, all these Mets fans are really confused, dazed, bummed. They're really sad about this happening at the World Baseball Classic, which, what a surprise, happens to be our third topic of the day. Edwin Diaz injury. So going right over from the internet. As you know, Edwin Diaz this past Wednesday in the Puerto Ricans' defeat in the World Baseball Classic over Dominican Republic. Edwin Diaz, in celebrating, went down with a right leg injury. Diaz, who ended up getting the 5-2 victory over Dominican Republic, went up for a big celebration, ended up getting hurt. Now, as far as we know, a lot of teammates got around him as soon as it happened. He ended up getting taken off the field in a wheelchair. It rolled down the concourse, and he was further evaluated, and now it says he could potentially be out for the season. So this is huge, especially with the Mets recently. Let me know if I get this wrong, Joe, but am I correct that they recently signed him to a pretty big contract?
Yeah, they signed him to a 5-year deal. I believe it was the most for a reliever ever.
So,
but they're actually being reimbursed for his salary this season.
Interesting. Very interesting. So as we know, guys, in the intro video, if you haven't seen it, go watch last week's video. Joe here is a Mets fan. So we're going to start with him, his thoughts, and his opinions and stuff about this injury and how it will affect going forward, especially if he's out for this season. So, Joe, go let's get your feedback on, if you saw the game, what do you think? What was your response to it initially, and how do you feel now?
Yeah, so I was watching the game at the beginning. I kind of turned it off. Team Dominican was losing by a decent amount, so I turned it off. And I saw that he got injured pretty bad. And it's just a really unfortunate thing. I wasn't even pissed off. I was pissed off at being a Mets fan, not that he was in the World Baseball Classic, but it's just an unfortunate thing. He was celebrating. I mean, he was jumping up and down. He tore his patellar tendon, I believe. But it does bring in the question, like, what are the Mets going to do going on and into the season? Because he's going to be out for around 8 months. And I think what they're going to do is probably sign Zach Britton or another closer, or just roll with what they have now, which is really unfortunate because he was the best reliever in the game last year.
I see. Interesting thoughts there, Joe. Now let's go to Eric for Eric's feedback about thoughts and stuff about the injury for the Mets player. As you know, Eric is a Phillies fan. Eric, what are your thoughts?
I'd like to quote somebody in this chat right now. When they found out that Edwin Diaz got hurt, they said, quote, "Such a Met way to get hurt," quote. Whoever said that can feel free to identify themselves, but
yes, that's correct. I did say that.
I was getting ready for bed. We were all getting ready for bed at that time, and I'd gotten a notification from Twitter from, I believe it was Jeff Tassin, saying, "Yeah, Edwin Diaz hurt," and I immediately texted the 3 people in the chat here, and told them, Edwin Diaz got hurt, and then eventually news kept trickling out. And worst case scenario, interesting that you said Diaz was the best reliever in the game last year. I would say Emmanuel Clase is better, but you could always make the argument different divisions. AL Central is nowhere near the NL East. Anyways, Edwin Diaz, it's a shame he got hurt. Very talented player. I'm just imagining Narco right now playing in the background of this video, but can't do that. So it's a shame he got hurt. playing in the World Baseball Classic, but I didn't realize the Mets were going to get reimbursed for his salary this year. That's interesting. Now, is that because he was playing in a non-MLB event, or is it just part of his contract?
Yeah, that's correct. I believe the World Baseball Classic, when players play for their teams, they actually have like sort of an insurance policy in place. So if something were to happen to one of their players, their salaries are covered.
Okay. That's good to know. See, I didn't know that. So thank you for teaching me something today. But other than that, I will save my other comments for the rest of later on. But it is good that the Mets do have the insurance policy. Zach Britton's pretty good. And Adam Ottavino is definitely an underrated reliever. So it was a good signing for them to get him for pretty dirt cheap. I think it was like 2 year, $8 million or something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
There's still a lethal bullpen. It's just you're not going to have someone pointing up to the sky when the inevitable Bryce Harper home run happens. Walk off Bryce Harper home run.
Oh, okay.
Or Kyle Schwarber, if you would. So.
I see the Phillies fan is feeling strong about his upcoming season, huh?
Interesting.
Oh, big time. But, hey, defending NL champs, only say that right now. So.
I mean, it does help the Phillies and the Braves' chances of winning the division even more.
Yeah, but, I mean, it also sucks that Nimmo got hurt, but that's not here nor there. Hopefully that's not serious.
Yeah, so was his ankle, so he avoided a knee injury, which is good.
All right, so there's some thoughts from a Phillies fan and, of course, a Mets fan that Edwin Diaz is on, that he's obviously injured now, and we'll see how this, erupts and stuff in the coming months as the season goes on, and if he'll even come back during the season. So let's just get to some rule changes. We have a couple rule changes starting this season. The big one, of course, being the pitch clock being used with some bigger bases, some new pickoff rules, and of course a new shift rule. So we're going to start with the pitch clock rule because this is obviously one of the bigger ones. So the new rule is pitchers will have 15 seconds to throw a pitch with the bases empty and 20 seconds with a runner on base. Hitters will need to be in the batter's box with 8 seconds on the pitch clock. So this is obviously a huge impact on, number one, obviously the pitchers, but it's also for the batters, because, you've seen batters not only in the MLB but in other leagues as well, the minors and stuff, take a lot of time outside the box, all this preparation, all these superstition stuff and that they do to, make them who they are and to get them comfortable in the batter's box. So we'll start with you, Joe. So thoughts on the pitch clock and, how do you think it will make changes and stuff to, the league or the pitchers or, the batters in general?
I mean, as we've seen in spring training, it's already made big changes. Speeding up the game. I think that's good for the game because from what I can tell, baseball is very boring to people who aren't into it. And a large reason is because it's so long and so boring, especially when you have two good pitchers going up against each other. So speeding the game up will make it better, but it will pose a challenge for both hitters and pitchers alike.
Yeah, exactly. Now, before we get to Eric, let me just remind, so basically how this is going to be enforced is if the pitcher has not started, quote-unquote, the motion to deliver the pitch before the expiration of the clock, he'll be charged with a ball. If a batter delays entering the box, he'll be charged with a strike. So, they're really stepping up this. And like Joe said, it definitely speeds up the game more, which is good because we know these games can get long and stuff. Even though they're going to have that ghost runner rule now permanently. So, Eric, what are your thoughts of all this?
Referring to the pitch clock in general, yeah. It's the problem with baseball. One of the problems with baseball is that it's such a slow-moving game. And obviously when it's a slow-paced, slow-moving game, the majority of your fan base is most likely going to be on the other side of 50 years old. And baseball is just struggling to keep its core audience. It's struggling to get younger. So that's a huge issue. What once was Americans' pastime is now kind of becoming America's number 3 sport. You can make the case. So that's a huge red flag if I'm a baseball owner. But at the same time, the pitch clock is something that they've been, tinkering with and thinking about using for years now. It's finally here. I think it's something that 10 years from now, we're not even going to think twice about it. When I went to a AA game last year, I saw the pitch clock in effect, and I was kind of surprised by it, but it did speed up the pace of the game, so that's a positive. And like Joe said, baseball is boring when there's a pitcher's duel, unless you're a fantasy owner and you have those pitchers on your team, but it's just not exciting. I'd like to see a lot more hits. I'm not a fan of the 3 true outcomes, so I prefer to see teams get like 5 runs on 10 hits a game, with all those hits being clutch singles and doubles, versus a 1-hit game where the 1 hit was a home run. But I mean, it's good to speed up the pace of the game for sure. And obviously it's spring training, so we don't know how it's really going to work out, because a lot of these guys are minor leaguers that want to prove, hey, I deserve to be in the majors. But the signs are looking good so far. So we'll see. I hope it's a good change for baseball.
Yes, I do as well. So like you said, in the long run, it won't really see much of an effect, but, it'll be a little thing in the beginning. But another rule change is the base sizes going from 15 inches to 18 inches. I mean, the biggest thing here is those close calls you have with the outs at first and second and third, obviously, when there's people on base. So do you guys want to touch on any of that, or is this, not really a big deal, or how do you see this being a big impact at all? So we'll start with you, Joe.
I mean, the bases are like ginormous now. I saw a picture of them next to maybe Altuve. But yeah, they look pretty big. I mean, everything looks pretty to Altuve. But I mean, it should have good effects on the game. I mean, there's a lot of close calls. The replay system has helped that to overturn and hold calls. But I mean, the bases should have a good effect on the game.
All right, and Eric?
The one thing I'm most excited about for the larger base is, now you said, what? I'll discuss this for the next step. So Joe basically said what I was going to say. So.
All right. Now getting to another rule here, we have the shift. So the new rule at the time the pitch is thrown, all 4 infielders are required to be on the field dirt or infield grass, with 2 on each side of second base. Players will be able to move as soon as the baseball leaves the pitcher's hand. Originally, infielders who had began the game on one side of the field would not be allowed to switch to the other side for the entirety of the game, but that was revised to each inning. I'm sorry, but that was hold on one second, let me just see. One side, but that would not be allowed to switch in the other side of the inning. But that was revised to just each inning, unless there's a mid-inning substitution. In other words, a player who starts an inning at first or second base has to remain on the side of the field for the whole inning, but can switch to a short or third base the next inning. If there's an injury mid-inning, then the infield can be reset. So we'll start with Eric this time on this. Any thoughts about this rule?
I mean, banning the shift is something that I've advocated for a long time. I don't like it. Like I said earlier, the reason I mentioned I like having the aspect of having 3, a bunch of hitters that contact guys is it's fun to have players on base. It stresses the pitcher out. It gets in the pitcher's head, so you get to see strong-willed pitchers take a step forward, whereas the weak-willed ones are going to be more suspect to struggle. So it makes having a good starting pitcher and a good reliever that much more valuable versus a lucky one. But banning the shift, how they're doing it, I'm okay with that. I like how they're doing it. I like how they're saying you have to keep 2 guys on each side of the bag. It's just, the thing is, how they did it, you can still have a well-positioned second baseman or shortstop right up the middle. So if the baseball comes up the middle, they can still get the play. The other thing that I do like about banning the shift, how they're doing it, is you're not going to see like David Ortiz, that one infamous moment where there was no run around and he bunts it along the third base line and gets on first base because the whole infield is in between first and second. That was a joke to me, so I'm very happy they're banning the shift.
All right, and you, Joe, any thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with Eric. The shift was just annoying, honestly, and it could be very frustrating for certain batters. A lot of batters tend to pull and hit towards one side of the field, like Joey Gallo, for example, that only hits on the right side. But, it'll definitely I think it will affect pitchers, some pitchers, pretty, in a big way. Their defense, they're going to have to rely more on their defense. And, like Eric was saying, it's going to separate the great pitchers and the mediocre pitchers in our league.
All right, so there you have Eric's and Joe's thoughts on this shift. Now let's go to the last.
What's your thought, Patrick? What's your thought on the shift?
Kind of the same. To be honest, I frankly think this was kind of a silly rule, but I feel like it needed to be enforced because, like Joe said, it would annoy the heck out of batters, and it would also prevent, I would see it as, if this wasn't, enforced and stuff, it would be a disadvantage, in my opinion, to batters and stuff, and now I see it's more of a controlling game, so, when this rule is enforced, it's going to give, the batter a lot more to think about and where he wants to hit the ball, whether he's a lefty or righty. So this will be interesting to see for sure as the season goes on. So the last one that we're going to cover on this video is pickoffs. So the new rule, pickoffs, are a version of a disengagement which consists of any time the pitcher makes a pickoff attempt, fakes a pickoff, or simply steps off the rubber for any reason, as well as when the defense requests time. Pitchers are allowed 2 disengagements per plate appearance without penalty. The disengagements rule resets if a runner or runners advance a base within the same plate appearance. And how it's going to be enforced: after a third step off, the pitcher will be charged with a balk, unless at least one offensive player advances a base or an out is made on an ensuing play after the step off. So let me just say here, I love when players get picked off because it's kind of like a I told you so kind of thing. So with this rule, it's like it kind of limits their options, but at the same time it makes them think wiser. Obviously pickoffs don't happen as often, and when they do, most of the time the player ends up getting back to the bag in time. So we'll start with Joe here. Do you have any thoughts about this?
Not much, but I agree with you. I like to see pickoffs, but I also like to see people stealing bases. I'm a big fan of Trey Turner. He's a great base runner, great at stealing bases, but I wonder how it's going to affect his game and other people like him, like John Birdie or something.
All right, and Eric?
So this rule, combined with the larger bases, really excites me because I am a huge fan of, like I've said before, I hate the 3 outcomes. I love contact baseball. Contact baseball also involves stealing bases to me. So these 2 rules combined will make it so more stolen bases happen. So guys that were getting about 6, 7 stolen bases can now get 10. And I love it. Now, pickoffs were really happening a lot during the playoffs this year. And it gets so annoying when you have a pitch, there's a batter up here, there's a runner on first, and it takes 3 minutes for the pitcher to throw the ball because he doesn't have a timer, and he's just throwing to first base to keep the runner at bay. Fans would always boo when it was the road team doing it, as they should. It's the most boring part of baseball, just waiting for the pitch to come and having to try to pick off the runner by just tossing the ball there. I remember Yu Darvish doing it in the NLCS. It's just not worth my time. I'm very happy they're banning it, and the fact that this will lead to more stolen bases, especially since now the Phillies have Trey Turner. Granted, the Mets have some base runners. Atlanta has some base runners in Cunha and Harris, but it's a good rule change. It's a good rule change, for sure.
All right, so those are pretty much most of the major rule changes that will be starting this season once it kicks off. So let's go to our last topic here, which was politely added by a fellow co-owner of this channel, Eric. So the World Baseball Classic, is it a joke? Now we're going to tie this directly into the Edwin Diaz injury. So Eric, did you want to start or did you want me to start? Because we have some, different sides of this viewing, and how would you want to do this?
So we all know our opinions on this. So Joe and I agree and you disagree with us. So, it doesn't matter how we want to start it. I don't know if you want to list your thoughts first, and then Joe and I can kind of respond to your thoughts, and then you can respond to our responses.
Yeah, sure. That's fine. I'll go first. So, as we know, we just covered the first topic, the Edwin Diaz injury, which happened to be when he was playing for Puerto Rico. Now, Puerto Rico is involved in the World Baseball Classic, which I see as a completely irrelevant tournament that the MLB players should be participating in. Why? Well, really, is it that much different than the Olympics? Is it that much different than the NHL All-Star Game? In the words of a former guy that I once knew that coaches the Flyers, John Tortorella, this is a bunch of waste of time. Like, should the World Baseball Classic be really including MLB players if they're going to get injured? As a Yankees fan, if this was Aaron Judge, I'd be pissed. I would feel bad, of course. Like, poor guy, he got injured. Was it really worth it? Did he really have to get injured? Should he even have been participating in this? So, of course, it's gonna be interesting to hear what Joe says about this, but I think it's a complete waste of time. I feel like MLB players should not be involved in the World Baseball Classic. I think to save them from worthlessly wasting their time before the season officially starts and getting injured, which, could be all for the whole season in the Diaz situation. Like I said, if this was Aaron Judge, I would be pissed. I would be extremely pissed. I'd be throwing arms. I'd walk into my local Dunkin' Donuts and start a fight. Okay? This is just really ridiculous, and it really gets on my nerves because this is no different than, let's say, Diaz participating in the Olympics, for example. The Summer Olympics, getting injured in the Olympics, in the baseball, and getting hurt, and and then he's out for the whole season or something. That's ridiculous. So I'll turn it over to, we'll start with Joe, because we're tying this kind of directly to the Mets situation and what happened. Joe, what are your thoughts about this? Where do you stand? Is the World Baseball Classic a joke?
Well, I don't think the World Baseball Classic is a joke. I actually think the tournament means a lot to many people, not from America, but from other countries. Francisco Lindor said it best. It's a huge accomplishment to play for your country, for your home country. And, some of these players consider the World Baseball Classic to be more important than a World Series championship. You're playing for your country. It's your whole livelihood. It's all you've ever known. And that sense of pride and notoriety that you can get for your country is just amazing, especially in places like Japan and the Caribbean and all that. But what happened to Diaz, it's just unfortunate. It was a freak accident. I would be mad, but it's not his fault. It's not the tournament's fault. And I still hope that next baseball classic, more and more major leaguers get involved, and it's good for the game. It's good for the tournament. So I'll turn it over to Eric.
Now, it's funny we're mentioning injuries here. Now, Patrick, did you see Gavin Lux when he tore his ACL running the bases in the World Baseball Classic? Does that more prove your point about injuries in the World Baseball Classic?
Keep going. I'm listening.
But does Gavin Lux tearing his ACL in the World Baseball Classic prove your point even more? Because he's a solid second baseman for the Dodgers.
Well, what are you trying to get at here, Mr. Eric?
Well, Gavin Lux didn't play in the World Baseball Classic. He participated in spring training, which is less important than the World Baseball Classic by a long shot, because I would much rather have the United States flag or the German flag on my jersey than wear my team's emblem, which I can do every year. The World Baseball Classic, like Joe said, is prestige. It's You're playing for your country. If you play your cards right, you can get so many more sponsorships if you win a gold medal with Team USA than you would playing in spring training. The team still has a say. I believe team doctors are consulted with any injury whatsoever that you have in the World Baseball Classic. And the way I view it, if Edwin Diaz had gotten hurt in spring training, would people be complaining about spring training? Would people be saying get rid of spring training? No, of course not. They'd say it's part of the game. So it's just how it works. Like, you know how people saying Gavin Lux tore his ACL, time to get rid of spring training. It's just how it works, and it's an unfortunate side effect of playing the game in general. World Baseball Classic should not be canceled. I like how they have it their last one was in 2017 or 2018, I think. So they try to have it like every 4 or 5 years, and it's exciting. It's just something that I've always liked watching. And again, obviously, United States reigning champs still. Dominican Republic didn't qualify for the semifinals this year, or quarterfinals even. So hopefully Team USA can get their gold medal back. But it's just a part of national pride. I absolutely love having the World Baseball Classic, and I watch as many Team USA games as I can. I just wish the pitchers actually showed up. Japan actually has a really lethal pitching staff. So, yeah.
All right, so there you have it. Thoughts on the World Baseball Classic, a joke or not? You can have your opinions in the comments. We'll be happy to respond to them, of course. And, we had the Diaz injury situation in the beginning. We covered the MLB rule changes. And then we just briefed on the World Baseball Classic. So that will pretty much do it for this episode. Will be more episode every week coming out, covering either baseball, NASCAR, football, or hockey. So we'll keep you updated throughout the week of when the next video will come out, preferably Friday or Saturday next week. As for Eric and Joe, I appreciate you guys joining me on this podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Indeed, thank you. Always a pleasure.
All right, and we'll talk to you guys next week as we cover our next topic. So we'll see you guys soon. Comment. We'd love to hear your thoughts about any of the Edwin Diaz injury, rule changes, or baseball classic. And we will see you guys next week.